It's a mixing console called Soundcraft. And today we are joined by Peter. Let me just quickly switch over. Morning, Peter. How you doing?
Good morning. Hi, Gabriel.
Awesome. Good to see you.
Good to see you too.
Great, awesome. And we're also
Yes.
joined by Shannon. In a second, I'm gonna give you guys an opportunity just to introduce yourself. So today's topic is assessment practices that become fraught with needless documentation and overemphasis on paperwork. In this time, more than ever, businesses are forced to focus on results that ensure productivity and sustainable business. Um, so I think, Peter, you can, from the get-go, maybe introduce yourself, and then we're going to give opportunity for Shannon. He's from QCTO to introduce himself, and then we're going to dive straight into some questions. Peter, over to you.
Hi, yes. Peter Horn here. I am also a business owner. I predominantly focus my expertise in learning and development. Have been for the past 23 years. Have also done lots of both voluntary and also mainstream work within the space of learning and development in South Africa. The structures, the processes, both from a workplace point of view as well as from a CETA accreditation point of view. And yeah, I met Shannon via my work with then the Energy and Water CETA. He and I have been working closely together for many years, and we are one of those collaborative networks where we bounce ideas off each other, share collaboratively um, thoughts and practices. And yeah, he's just one of a face of many in the family in training and development in South Africa.
Awesome. Shannon, if you maybe just quickly want to introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about QCTO.
Okay, good morning, colleagues. As Peter has already given me a very nice introduction, thank you for that. Yeah, I'm part of the family of skill development. I've spent let's say about 9 years at EWCTA. I was the manager for quality assurance there, also known as ETQA or quality assurance and compliance, if you want to call it that. Basically looking after assessment and all the normal things that gets looked after by quality departments such as accreditation, registration of SMEs, RPL experts, so workplaces providers, etc., etc. Um, I also I went into private consulting after leaving the WCTA and also went into private training. And then I was called up by the QCTO just to help them for a short period to get all their systems in place for artisan development, let's say assessment training. So I'm basically looking after the engineering cluster. There's currently two clusters. We divided according to the SAQA codes, qualification codes, or let me call them the fields. So the engineering fields would be predominantly the engineering, technology, and infrastructure, and those are the SAQA fields I'm looking after. There's also unfortunately, they couldn't join us. There's also a cluster head for the business and general fields. And at the moment, because QCTO is trying to grow in terms of their capacity, they only have two clusters looking, and we've split between the SAQA fields. We've split the fields between the two clusters. But ideally, or if I can say, eventually, the fields and the clusters should grow within the QCTO so that they cater for everything. So you might find certain qualifications that fall within cluster one that don't really meet the description of engineering and trades. And then you might have certain qualifications falling into cluster two that don't really meet the description of business, general commerce, law, financial, etc. Like for example, it's like, where do you place a veterinarian? It's not really an engineer, but it's also not really commerce, so to speak. So, there are,
Yeah.
due to the limited capacity, I am looking out to certain qualifications that don't ideally fall under the banner of engineering or trades. But I think that's all part of the growth, and
Awesome.
it's all working towards the final end goal of having a cluster that accommodates each and every SAQA field, and having the capacity to attend to those qualifications.
Awesome.
So within my cluster, we handle everything from assessment, accreditation, qualification development and registration of those qualifications, membership registrations with the Department of Education, and monitoring of historically registered programs. So those are all your CETA registered programs, the ones that QCTO are trying very hard to phase out with no success so far. And then we have the newly developed occupational qualification and the monitoring thereof. And most of that monitoring speaks about newly accredited providers that now have learner uptake, and then finally have assessments, or let me say the first few assessments happening according to assessment centers that are finally now accredited through their various AQPs, and they have now piloted the new ASA, External Integrated Summative Assessment, and of which now are having uptake and need to be monitored. And it's all about piloting because the systems aren't all in place there yet. And I think also for this discussion, the assessments that we're looking at trying to pilot on electronic platforms will speak more to those new occupational qualifications, because I think that's QCTO's biggest goal at this stage, is to get the occupational qualifications that they've invested so many years in developing blueprints and frameworks against, seeing those qualifications piloted and seeing assessments and learner uptakes happen, and seeing certificates being printed for those occupational qualifications, of which now needs to happen electronically. So
Yes.
I hope you can shine some light on
Yeah,
the
let's.
situation and assist us, give us some ideas, because we really are scratching our heads on a day-to-day basis on how we can make this happen, because there's so many requirements, there's so many regulatory frameworks, there's so much
Yes.
fraud in the country. I'm sorry to say that, but there's so much corruption in our
Yes.
country. So it's so hard for us to do things because we have to be graceful in this approach. It's a new manner of thinking. We don't see wet ink and hard paper. Things are happening online, but obviously now it's not a normal e-learning platform that we're looking at, because we can't travel to the provider. Ideally, if we had systems under normal conditions, we could always go there and let them do things electronically and monitor them physically on site. But now we can't visit people, we can't fly. To do
Yeah.
anything in Johannesburg, we can't do it in Cape Town.
Yeah.
Even if we did get permits, not everybody out there can get permits. So we have a very big conundrum. So yeah,
I
I
think.
think that's more than an introduction.
It's also we've also been talking about that. It's this massive change. I mean, I think up to now, everyone thought of digital as a nice to have, and now all of a sudden it's become the main
Yes,
thing. Peter,
only to have.
yeah, it's the only to have. Yeah, Peter, you mentioned drama within the assessment space. Describe why you feel there is drama, or if you maybe want to elaborate on that.
Yes, Shannon actually alluded to it in his second part of his discussion
Yeah.
there. The drama is started, I believe, with as the skills development and learning and development space evolved, as any business would evolve, the paperwork and admin has overcome its intent.
Yeah.
So now the paperwork and the admin has become the tail that's wagging the dog here. It is also the area, I believe, that is has opened itself up to a lot of this fraud that Shannon has alluded to. It is because of, and it's not intentional either. I mean, obviously, a misdemeanor like fraud is intentional, but when the CETA started, there was never an intent for this administration and the quality assurance, or the admin of quality assurance, to overtake the delivery of skills development. And we need to bear in mind that business drove this process and the need for this process back in 1992. We, as business owners, wanted a way to buy into and participate in the national skills strategy of the country. Obviously, the take-up wasn't that great back in those days, and there was a need for almost a carrot and a stick approach to motivate business to participate. However, I've seen where businesses did 100% participate in skills development and bought into the vision for our country, they have seen the greatest result. Fast forward 2010, 2010, even now, 2020, we have kind of lost sight of where we started. And that, to me, is the drama, the good, the bad, and the ugly. There's a lot of good in what we do, but I feel that people are now reevaluating what we are doing because of where we're standing now with COVID-19. And we are sifting out what really needs to be done from what has kept us busy. Now, as business people, we all know that results are not do not come from the busyness of one's life. They come from deliverables. And I think far long have we been focusing on the busyness of skills development. Skills development is not the paperwork that we do. And let's contextualize this to the DLAP context. Assessment is not the paperwork we do. Assessment is measuring results. And the results from a business person's point of view is competence and delivery.
Yeah. Awesome. Thank you very much. The next question, I think it would be nice if both of you can comment on this. What then is assessment if it's not testing and providing portfolios of evidence?
Okay, I'll start. I think that we need to look at what a person can do. And I just remember my very, very beginnings of this journey. We all said that, and as skills development practitioners, we all agree that assessment is knowledge, skill, and ability and values. And when we all got in a room and discussed how this would be, a lot of the workplace leaders said it's quite simple. If a person can deliver a result in the way in which we would like them to, that is competence. Okay, so that's a very, very rudimentary definition of competence. And that's what we should be assessing. The process of a person being able to deliver something, an output, given certain inputs. And the assessment is to determine where in that system of input, throughput, and output, where in that system is it going wrong? Is it a combination of the workplace resources and equipment plus training, or is it just the individual themselves, the employee, that has the problem with the output? And, businesses are focused 24/7 on outputs, which is basically their income, their profits that they make, their turnover, and their productivity. And they can see very, very quickly in microseconds when things change. And there is a direct link between the individual's competence and that productivity. And that is what we are assessing. So I don't believe that these great, grandiose portfolios of evidence demonstrate that sufficiently. They have become, as I said, the drama behind this whole process. they have become fraught with paperwork. And a manager, an ops manager, will often say to me, you know, Peter, getting a portfolio of evidence together is the worst thing in their entire lives. It's like pulling out hair. They'd rather put needles in their eyes than sit around and collaborate and bring a file together. And yes, they understand the need for it to prove competence. But I do believe that there are so many creative ways in which we can prove competence. So now I'm going to throw the banner to Shannon, and I want him to continue there from his perspective.
Okay, no worries, Peter. I think you've put it quite well, but I think maybe it's the qualifications that I deal with. It gives me a completely different perspective on and maybe it's also the environment. But I think that also shows us the broad spectrum of what an assessment can do for an organization or for a learning environment, because I think the angle I'm looking at it from, it gives me so many other things that you haven't mentioned, not to take away from what but it's actually to add. So I think it shows you how broad assessment can actually be. I've just been making some notes. Peter's given me enough time to think about it, which is maybe a little bit unfair. so I don't have to think on my feet. What for me, the first thing when we assess somebody is, I want to see, can they have, according to their skills and abilities, can they show job specific delivery? Okay. So ideally, the goal of all of this is to get somebody into a job of some kind, or into some kind of business environment, or working for themselves, but they need to be able to do something that they can produce a product or service that somebody can pay for eventually, in layman's terms, that will give them sustainability in the industry. So, the first thing I would look for is job specific delivery. So an assessment must test somebody um, to prove that they can work somewhere. If I can put it
Yes.
as simple as possible. Then once I have put a yardstick for this job specific delivery, the first thing I would look for is the efficiency. Can they do their job efficiently enough? Can they do it consistently enough? And also the assessments need to be consistent between party A, B, and C,
Yeah.
so that we're testing everybody's abilities fairly. Then you start going into the SAQA principles, which I would not like to quote. But yeah, there must be that consistency. And then I want to see the competence in their delivery from an integrated learning perspective. So I want to take tasks and jumble them together and say, okay, for what you've learned, you could maybe work in 5 different environments, or call them companies or settings. And for each of these, you've learned enough for you to work in any of these. So I'm going to take maybe 3 out of these 5 and mix them together, and I'm going to assess you. And party B will have the same, but a little bit more of a mix to specialize on something else. So for me, it's all about integrated learning, how efficiently and how consistently a learner can perform, showing their skills and abilities for job specific delivery. That's my, that's that would be my explanation to somebody that would ask me, what is assessment to you? And then also the manner in which assessments are conducted. Like I said, there needs to be the assessment itself needs to be simple. It needs to be also, like I said, consistent. But then it needs to also be fair, and it needs to really put an employer in a space where they can feel comfortable about employing this person for a specific job, or at least, not if we can't get as specific to the job as we'd like to, then at least the employer can be comfortable with the foundation that they've been given to work on and give the learner that additional workplace specialization skills without having the fear of having to start too far back with the person. You get what I'm saying? So we want to actually give the industry comfort, and we want them to believe in our assessments to the extent and let me give you this example. There's a lot of people, maybe even myself, we walk around with these degrees, and what we're doing has nothing to do with these degrees. Really, there's absolutely. But there are those days and moments where the cognitive thinking kicks in, and you lean on certain things that you've learned a long time ago, and they do help us. But they're not specific to our jobs. Our jobs have evolved and become something else, and you know. You don't know how to produce another version of yourself based on what you're doing with the qualifications out there. So if I want to recreate another one of myself, I could probably send them for one of the diplomas, probably the ODETDP one. I think that's probably the closest we can get, you know. But if you look at your job description and your job title, it really is evolved. So you know, I think that's the challenge we have is people don't believe in these assessments because once we've assessed a learner and deemed them competent, they're still not doing what we expect of them. And I think it's that plug fit between existing jobs and industry and how the assessments can help us identify the person's skills and abilities for those particular jobs out there. And also, another challenge is that we mustn't limit it to the extent whereby we're not considering if an evolutionary, and it's happening, we're witnessing it right now, whereby with this whole COVID thing, there's a birth of new industries, there's the death of other industries. Like, for example, if you look at the magazine and printing industry, that's completely dying. There was one big publisher this week that said they're throwing in the towel. It's been a long time coming, but now the camel's back has been broken. They can't continue based on the fact that everything's moving digital. People don't buy magazines anymore. They'll have to reevaluate if they want to continue circulating information. It will have to be on digital platforms. But then the nature of, let's say, or the jobs that exist within that industry will dramatically evolve, you know?
Yeah.
So we have to ask ourselves, for a situation like that, how will we be assessing people to ensure that they are now competent for those new jobs and industries? And it's not always a matter of which qualification you went through. An assessment can come based on your experience, and that's what I love about RPL. I might have been working in an environment that's completely irrelevant to any existing qualification. But I can, if an assessment is there that suits a job that doesn't have a feeder qualification, you can still give me the post based on the accuracy and the well thought throughness of the assessment. So, I think that Peter's now celebrating. I can stop.
I think what
So I
I'm
must have said something right in all of that.
what I'm hearing from both of you is that it's very very easy to continue with assessment that doesn't really serve its purpose and the business.
Yes.
And I think the wonderful time we are living in at the moment, or within all the chaos, is it's a time to reevaluate how we're doing things. And for some reason, the people that have an option, they have to be open to it. It's our new normals. Everyone's talking about our new normals. So there's two questions so the one we kind of touched on is integrated learning, just not an add-on onto assessment. And I want to tie it in with a question, another question, because I think it will go well together, is where do you feel, where's assessment gone wrong? If we have to highlight one of the things, I think we've both of you have said these assessment processes, and Shannon's alluded to some process that doesn't work at all and needs to be relooked at. If we have to highlight those things, what, in your opinion, where do we need to look, and which of these things do we need to throw out?
Well, I think that the assessment is the evolution, that word evolution that Shannon mentioned, is where it started falling into deep water. Assessment didn't evolve and hasn't evolved with the jobs. And so that's what I believe, is that assessment has become the tail that's wagging the dog. Because we need to make sure that people are competent and we're using assessment tools. A lot of those assessment tools are outdated, do not fit the job, do not fit what we are trying to see. What we are trying to observe and assess is, as Shannon said, whether the person is able to do the job. Can they deliver on a job? And yes, qualification comes into it, but qualification is not the be-all and end-all here. The qualifications a person has and the previous learning they have on paper, that is, should supplement what they are doing. It shouldn't be the starting point. And so this brings us to that next sticky question of integration. Now, if you talk to assessors, every single assessor has a different point of departure on how to integrate assessment. And this is what DLAP is trying to start bringing to the fore, is the granular levels of expertise within an assessor's basket of skills. Because Shannon and I have come over a period of 23 years, we have learned intuitively how to do integration, how to look for integration. It's something we can't just say, this is how you do it. You've actually got to feel it for yourself as an assessor and do it. And it does not belong on a paper. We can record integration, yes, and we can attest to the fact that we have integrated our processes, but it's very intuitive. And that comes and flows through from the person's job. So as Shannon said, we can't learn ourselves because the job itself has changed so quickly in such a short space of time. And all these systems, all these papers, all these tools of assessment aren't keeping up with the change, this fast pace of change that is coming and is that we're experiencing, that evolution of work. And assessors need to remain current in those types of jobs, but also be with the people. Yeah, I don't know how else to articulate it. Shannon, maybe you can lend some wisdom here to what I'm saying.
Okay. No worries. I think you've put it quite well, Peter. Yeah, the paperwork and layers and bureaucracy is something that we really need to work on. Yeah, but there's just so much of it. I don't know where to start because it gets influenced by so many regulations. So I would like to see a skill development lawyer go into legislation and start to find solutions on a regulatory level, because we only carrying out like the PFMA, we just can't help it. You can see an opportunity in front of your eyes, but you cannot go with that opportunity. It's incorrect. You have to go through a process. There's so many things that like for example, when it comes to the financial part of what funds and drives all of this, there's so many different pockets and industries and players involved that need to be accommodated. And it's like, let me give you one example. If we said we're going to go full on digital from today, we're dropping all the regulations, we're forgetting about all our paperwork, we're going digital. In our socio-economic context, I'm a learner. Who's going to give me a laptop or a tablet? If you do give it to me, who's going to give me the data? If I did have the data, who's gonna protect me on the taxi from being robbed from this item? You know, if we force training centers to have it, who's gonna afford it, and who can and who can't? You know, will it be sustainable? Will it be feasible? You know, there's just so many discussions, and you know, even if we did have regulations that just made things simple, just our context makes everything so convoluted in terms of all the aspects. Because, like, let me give you an example. I'm privileged enough to have my schoolwork for my two kids being sent via email. We can use platforms like these and liaise with teachers, but there's schools that can't. There's parents that can't. I mean, we have parents in our society that's illiterate. You know, that just you know, there's just so many other things that just make everything so hard to balance. So I think there's so much work to be done in the
Yeah.
country as a whole. So I think those paper heavy processes are only but one of the, you know, of the looming issues and it's all affected by regulations and laws and systems, and it's all grounded by our national context. And yeah, I think that's another discussion for another day.
That's good.
Yes.
We can talk about that
But
for
definitely,
quite a while. We've got 3
yeah.
minutes left, so we need to start
Okay,
wrapping it up.
but let me close by saying
Yes.
this: QCTO is definitely, their stance is to try and do away with as much bureaucracy as possible. Hence, the learner registration process, the RPL policies, and all of those things. They're taking a lot of the paperwork away,
Yes.
whereby it's simple to enroll for a program. It's simple to get into a program. It's easier to get accredited. You know, they're just trying to work on that as one
That's
of their
awesome.
biggest goals. That's their vision. And then to bring you back to the question about work integrated learning, was it? What was the question again? Sorry.
Sure,
Is
we've got 2 minutes left, so
I really want to.
I
Yeah.
think
The
we need to
problems.
do that in
yeah.
Let me quickly answer this. The problems with assessment. Let me give you my
Your
long and short
your
and my
30-second
simple
version.
answer. The biggest problem is the blanket approach. We cannot have a blanket approach. When you assess a plumber, it has to be different from a person studying IT. You cannot have the same assessment policies. Even in trades, the policies and procedures must differ for each and every occupation so that it can be specified. You cannot have a blanket approach. That's why you cannot assess a plumber in the same way that you assess a boilermaker or a mechanic. It's all different.
That's
And that
awesome.
is why we are struggling. The blanket approach.
Love that.
Thank
I agree.
We're gonna.
I love that.
yeah.
I love that.
I think we're only getting
Well done, Shannon.
really getting into it now. Peter, just 5 more words from you, and then we're gonna have to close.
We're only warming up.
Yeah, we should have started. Yeah.
So, yeah, no, brilliant. And so, as we have given you a taster to the good, the bad, and the ugly of
Yes.
assessment, this
Yeah.
drama is in various acts. So we're only seeing
Awesome.
the intro act right now. We need to talk more and have act 1, act 2, and so we go and conclude our drama. So yeah, watch the space. DLAP is going to be really challenging a lot of thoughts and ideas and bringing people around to talk about these things. It's a great opportunity.
I think we'll need to have another session where we just talk about the solutions and not just highlight all the problems. Anyway, thank you very much for your time. I really appreciate it. And yeah, please dial in next week, Friday, for more. Keep well. Cheers.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you so much.
Thanks
Bye-bye.
for the invite. I really enjoyed the discussion. Thank you so much. Keep
Cheers.
well.
A
Bye-bye.
pleasure.
Keep
Thank
safe.
you, Shannon. You too.
Keep safe.
You too.
Okay.